already know this video is not gonna get any less than 3 views because I know none of you are watching this. Hello and welcome back to the channel, and I just watched Hellboy, the Crooked Man. So what's this? The 4th live-action interpretation of Hellboy with the first 2 Guillermo del Toro movies, which are fucking amazing. To me, those films are absolute masterpieces. And of course, the recent-ish Hellboy reboot from 2019. And now we have this new version. Anytime they announce anything Hellboy related, as a huge Hellboy fan, I always get super excited. It's the same feeling that I get when they announce anything new Ghostbusters related. I love Hellboy almost as much as I love Ghostbusters. This movie's directed by Brian Taylor, but the script was written by the actual Hellboy creator, Mike Mignola, which was really exciting to me. I know Mike for the longest time has been wanting to make a Hellboy film that really follows through on the Hellboy comics, that's mostly or at least 90% faithful to his own work, and we finally get that here with Hellboy the Crooked Man. Oh boy. This is gonna be a really hard one for me because as a Hellboy fan, there's a lot of this movie that I love. As a huge Hellboy fan, not only a fan of the character, but a fan of the comics, there's a lot of stuff in this movie that really works. But it feels like every time they take a step in the right direction, they take like 2-3 steps backwards. It's like, oh my god, why? Let me come out clear from once and for all. I do not think this movie is horrible. There are some very glaring issues with this film that were just very hard for me to avoid. Because yes, as a huge Hellboy fan, the fact that they're finally really doing a Hellboy movie that takes the comic book seriously, or that really tries to do the closest to a step-by-step adaptation of a Hellboy story, to me that's amazing. As a fan, I think that's really cool. But also, the critical side of me is like, but a lot of shit here is still not working. Like, you can say whatever you want about the Guillermo del Toro movies. I know a lot of fans of the comics have a certain way they feel about those movies, and I get what they mean. They're not direct adaptations of Mike Mignola's stories, and I understand that. But what Guillermo del Toro did with Hellboy, I think not only was very creative, but it worked for the character in a feature-length film. Not only one film, but 2 films. Del Toro did something really smart by, yes, taking things from the comics that people recognize from those stories, but doing something a little bit new with them and reinterpret Hellboy as a character and its stories in a way that, yes, it's new, but it's creative and it's fun and it works, even though, again, it's not a step-by-step adaptation of the stories of Hellboy. It still feels like the world of Hellboy. Hellboy still feels very much like his comic book counterpart. The way Ron Perlman interprets this character is absolutely amazing. To this day, Ron Perlman is still the best Hellboy. Okay, nothing against David Harbour and this new actor. His name is really blanking my head right now. But none of these other actors that played Hellboy are bad. They're different interpretations of the character. But I'm gonna be fair with this. I'm gonna focus on the pros and then I'll talk about the cons. First of all, for the positive stuff here, I think the style of the movie is great. I think what they did in terms of direction with this is interesting. I would say that it works 100%, but this isn't horribly directed by any means. There are a few shortcomings with its style, but it was still a style that I liked, and it did feel very much like I was watching a Hellboy comic come to life, and to me, that was really great. Also, I think the cast is great. The new actor, again, that plays Hellboy, I think he's actually pretty good with the character when they actually allow him to do stuff, but I'll get to that later. And the fact that they took a more horror approach to this was actually a genius idea. I mean, I know that Guillermo del Toro movies had horror elements to them, but they weren't necessarily completely horror movies. This does feel mostly like it's trying to be a horror flick. And sometimes it works, and sometimes, well, I'll talk about that now. Now, let's talk about the cons. First, let me talk about Hellboy himself. Again, nothing against this actor. I think he did a pretty decent job with the part, but I still feel he lacks a little bit of personality. In fact, most of the time in this movie, Hellboy barely does anything, if I'm being completely honest. Like, most of the time he's more of an audience member. It's more like he's just looking at all the crazy shit that's happening. He barely gets into any action, and a lot of people always talk about how Hellboy's not really an action comic, but there is action in the comics. Like, Hellboy, yes, he's a detective, but when he needs to get his hands dirty, bitch, he will get his hands dirty. And I feel like we didn't really get to see that side of Hellboy here, which was really disappointing. Going back to the direction, again, while I like the style that they were going for, there are some places where it definitely doesn't quite work for me. The best way I can describe this is that it feels like this was like an hour-long pilot for a TV show. I'm not kidding. To me, the way this was filmed, the way that this was directed, the way it's presented overall, really does feel like this is the first episode of them trying to create a Hellboy TV show. Which, to me, that sounds really cool, but this is a feature-length film. So I'm gonna judge it as a feature-length film. Boy, in terms of production, this shit goes from, oh, this looks pretty good to, what the fuck is this? The film tries its best to hide some of its more clunky-looking effects, to say the least. I mean, this movie obviously has CGI, but believe me, the movie does a lot of hard work in trying to hide its really clunky CGI. And sometimes it's good at it, and sometimes it's really bad at it. And unfortunately, because this movie does have some creatures and some little critters here and there, there's going to be CGI included. And let me just say this right now, a lot of the CGI in this movie is really bad. Like, holy shit, it's like actually fucking terrible. Now, going back into the horror aspect of the film, yes, you know, this movie is trying to set itself more as a horror flick. The horror is not very effective in this. I mean, this movie doesn't necessarily have jump scares. It has maybe one, but none of this movie is really scary. A lot of it is really either goofy or just kind of stupid, which I guess in a way is kind of how the world of Hellboy is. It's really ridiculous. There's a lot of creatures in the Hellboy universe that make no fucking sense. A lot of it is a bunch of, well, this is a demonic creature, so you just gotta go with it. But at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, but you also have to make them threatening. In the comics, they're threatening because the art in the comics is fucking amazing. But here, because this is live action, you gotta give me a little bit more, man. Like you can't just give me some of these lazy ass creatures or some of these lazy ass monsters or entities and just be like, this is how they are here. Yeah, but they're not scary. The soundtrack is really nothing special. I mean, most of the film's score is just your typical eerie horror music. There's a couple of songs that they throw here and there, and they don't really contribute much to the themes or what's going on in the movie, so, I don't know, man. This movie is legitimately fucking tearing me apart. The fan side of me really is leaning to, oh, but it's comic book accurate, oh, and I like it, but then the critical part of me is kind of going, no, but some of this is bullshit. It's pretty simple. This movie's not horrible. But can I really say that it's a good movie? Not really. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad movie either. So this movie unfortunately just kind of falls into that middle ground of it just being kind of mid. You know, it's just middle of the road. It exists. There's parts that I like about it, and there's parts that I really don't like about it. This movie is impossibly the worst place that it can be, because a movie can be either really good or really bad. And the worst thing about a movie is to fall in that middle ground where it's neither one or the other. It's just kind of there. And that's what this movie feels to me. Unfortunately, as a Hellboy fan, it really saddens me to say that Hellboy and the Crooked Man is a 5 out of 10. I know it's not really the rating that I wanted to give it, and from what I've seen, a lot of other fans are really actually enjoying it and loving it, and I'm really happy for y'all, okay? I don't know, maybe I'm just that weird fan that just really wants better. Again, say whatever you want about the Guillermo del Toro movies, and even the 2019 movie, but at least they tried some really crazy shit that, while it was goofy, and especially in the 2019 movie, was as stupid as fuck, at least it was entertaining. Not a lot of here is really that entertaining. For those fans that are really loving it, I'm happy that you guys are able to enjoy it. To me, I was just expecting a little bit more. But thank you so much for watching. What do you think of Hellboy the Crooked Man? Did you love it? Did you hate? Or you're just kind of in the middle? I know none of you have watched this, and I know none of you are gonna watch this ever. So it almost feels kind of useless that I'm asking this. But nonetheless, leave it down in the comments. I really want to see what you guys think about it. And like always, good day, good night, and stay safe.